Okay, everyone. It is September 9th, 2020, and you are watching Unfound Live, coming up on its 3-year anniversary sometime in October. So about a month from now. I don't know exactly what the day is, but it is coming up. I'm doing well. I just want to remind all of you as you watch tonight, please give this video a thumbs up. And I should also add that if you are not subscribed to Unfound's YouTube channel, please do so. You'll get, of course, alerts when we upload new videos, which has been happening quite often recently. So you don't have to go searching for it. Just become a subscriber to the channel. And that way you just don't have to check in all the time. You will get an alert in your email when these things happen. So once again, if you're watching this video or as you are watching the video tonight, please give this video a thumbs up, a like. And if you are not a subscriber to the YouTube channel, please consider doing so at your earliest convenience. Hello, Laura and Karen, Angela. Hey, Angela, I see you found the program. That's good. Susan, Jasmine, Shuri says, hey, what can I say? Valerie, Concha, Ann, Kathy, Christine, everybody, thank you for joining in this evening. Have a lot to talk about as usual. This show usually goes at least like an hour and 45 minutes long. I have some breaking news on a disappearance that Unfound covered way back in 2017. I don't have any information more than what is already out there in the public that came out today, but I will try to give you my best insight into what I think this new information means. And so I'll throw around some different ideas there. That's probably where I'm going to be starting here in a few moments. I just want to make sure that everybody gets tuned in first. As for me, I spent my weekend up in a place called, two places actually. I stayed in one little town and I played disc golf in another town. I played 2 rounds of disc golf in a tournament in Floral City, actually just south of Floral City in a place called Floral Park. It's a park that's in Floral City. Imagine that, on the outskirts. And it was 24 baskets each day. I played pretty average. Actually, probably a little below my expectations, but I'm not just a little off, but it wasn't horrible. So I came away not being too ticked off about it. And it did get to play with some good guys on each of the cards that I was on. In fact, on the second card, I played with a couple guys who I know fairly well, and that was just completely because we all shot around the same score first round, and I don't think any of us were too happy, and we weren't too happy with our second round scores either. But it was hot. I'm here to tell you it was a scorcher. Now, luckily, I have a cart and that I can put my bag on, and then I can put an umbrella on top of it. And so I can stand in the shade. This course does have trees, but not a lot of trees. If you remember from a few weeks ago when I played in the tournament over here in Clearwater at a place called Coachman, it's a smaller course, and it has a lot of trees on it, a lot of shade, unless you're like on the edges of the course. But in the interior where most of the baskets are, it's pretty shaded. Up there at Floral City, Floral Park, you're out in the open. In fact, we had quite a few baskets out there just in the middle of the field with no trees at all. So it was good to have my cart. It was good to be able to stay under the umbrella. And you will notice that I did not even use any sunscreen, and you can tell that my face hardly got burnt at all. Granted, it's been a few days, but still, I didn't get No, my arms got a little bit, but my face didn't get hardly any sun on it at all. Of course, it helps for my neck that my hair is long and I have a hat on and everything. So, but it was hot. I took a lot of water and Gatorade out there. And when I was done with 24 baskets, I was ready to. I was ready to go home. I stayed at a really nice place in Brooksville, which is about 15 minutes south of where I was playing. These people had this little place set up above their garage. It was like a separate building above the garage where they park their cars. It was nice. I mean, I was like blown away. I was like, wow, this is nice. Really felt really cozy. And I got some work done there. I did the interview for this coming Friday's episode while I was there on Friday evening. And then I also filmed a video that's already been uploaded for Joshua Guimond. I filmed that while I was up there too and got some other things done as well, some phone calls and things. So it was a nice place to work. It was a nice place to stay. The air conditioning was great. I ordered Domino's pizza with chicken wings and stuff. I made a complete pig of myself. I really did. And it was a good weekend to get away. And the interesting thing is the person that I was staying at this Airbnb, the guy, he came over and we talked. So I was telling him about Unfound and everything we do. He had, not of course, but he hadn't heard of it before. So I was telling him all about that. And I think he found it very interesting. So once again, for those of you who are just tuning in, do not forget to give this video a thumbs up on whatever device that you are using to watch this show this evening. Please do not forget that. And in addition, I'm going to guess maybe some of you watch this live show, and I really appreciate that, but you might not be subscribers to the channel, meaning we could be uploading videos to it, and you wouldn't know about it unless you actually went to Unfound's channel. Well, you can, if you're a subscriber, you get those uploads, you get those alerts automatically. So please become a subscriber. Of course, it's free to the Unfound Podcast Channel. Hello, Christina said hello to you. Michelle, what's going on? LaFord, Paula, Twinkle. Michelle, you should know that I'll be doing a Brandy Wells video probably tomorrow. I'll probably upload it sometime tomorrow, along with Cleashindra Hall, and maybe I'll try to fit in another one in there as well. So that's what I've been doing in my spare time when I'm not working on the episodes. I've talked to a lot of people over the past week, last 10 days. A huge, crazy amount of people. New disappearances. We're going to be covering our first disappearance from Washington, D.C. I'm supposed to do that interview on Sunday. I think it's going to happen. I'm confident. And that will be next Friday. So we'll be going to Washington, D.C. for the first time next Friday. So a week and a half from now. So I'm excited about that. You're welcome, Michelle. So that's what's been going on with me. And, it's, given everything that's gone on this year, I just found out that I would never mention his name, but I found out that a friend of mine I've had two good friends of mine lose their jobs within the last couple months, due to COVID and everything else. And at least one of them has luckily found a job, but he was out of work for quite a while. And that's something considering his work experience, his education, etc. And he just told me about that today. So I feel very fortunate to be able to work and to continue to be able to help everybody and to be in a financial situation where I can do so. I just feel really bad. And of course, most of my friends have kids and everything. So I really feel for all of them. And I know a lot of people out there going, it's very tough. It's very, very difficult. So I was a little surprised when he told me that he had been out of work for a while and hadn't told me. Of course, it's none of my business. but he wanted to tell me that now he works for a different place now. But my one other friend, very, very good friend of mine, one of my best friends, still looking for something. So tough times. And I try to count my blessings every day to be able to do this and be in a situation where I can do it. So that's everything going on. This weekend, I'm going to be going down to Sarasota. Haven't been down there for a while to play. I'm going to play a practice round down there. And then there's a 1 round, what they call a flex start tournament, which means you just show up between these particular times and you play. And I'll be playing with at least one guy I've played with before down there. So I'm going to get down to Sarasota probably around 11 a.m., play the one course as practice, and then go to the other course for this 1 round flex start tournament. Because next weekend, so almost like a week and a half from now, I have a 2 round tournament down there. I will not be staying down there. I'll be driving back and forth because it's only an hour. It's really only an hour from here to there, and that's not too bad. Whereas up to Floral Park, it's about an hour and a half, and I have to go through Tampa to get there, and you never know what you're going to run into. You never know. Whereas going down that way to the south, it's not as big a deal as long as there's not a wreck on the Skyway Bridge. So those are some things. It's disc golf and Unfound for me. That's my life. That's my life. Dad is doing good. Dad is doing real good. Talked to him a couple days ago. So now that everybody, is tuned in here, we're like 11 minutes into the program. I want to start off with the biggest news, and this is news that is just breaking today. That, if you can believe it, once again, it's been posted in the group, but if you haven't seen it, that Eric Franks, it's the disappearance that we covered in March, February, March, maybe March, April of 2017. So 3.5 years ago, very in Unfound's infancy. You will remember, if you will, that Eric, not only did he disappear, but his car disappeared as well. And it's weird that I was just talking about this a few weeks ago regarding Esther Westenbarger, that in Unfound's cases as a whole, that we've covered 180 disappearances, but really we've only covered like 6 or 7 where a person and their vehicle went missing and continued to be missing. Of course, Esther's was one of those, and it was solved over the summer. Well, Eric Franks is also one of those disappearances where he disappeared in the Saginaw, Michigan area, and his car disappeared as well. And that was 9 years ago. And if just to go through the generalities of it, he was up there. He had found out that a girlfriend that he had his child, had his daughter. He didn't know about it. So he went up there to kind of connect with his biological daughter and be a good father and everything. But his girlfriend had married another man, and he was up there staying in a motel, getting work. And then all of a sudden he disappears, and his car does too. And what makes Eric Franks's disappearance noteworthy to me is that it has to be one of the longest time spans between a person going missing and their missing persons report being filed. You wouldn't think about that in Eric Franks's situation, but if you don't remember, somebody was pretending to be him, using his phone and using social media for months after what we believe to be the disappearance date. He disappeared in March of 2011. Well, there was somebody who had his phone, his laptop, that was pretending to be him well into the summer of 2011. And his missing persons report wasn't filed until like November. So it went from March to November before anybody filed a missing persons report. Still hard for me to imagine. Once again, has to be the longest time between a person probably going missing and the report being filed. And just knowing the generalities of Eric's disappearance, you wouldn't think that, but that's what happened. Well, his car has been found. And so it's interesting to me, once again, being that I was just talking about all of this recently with Esther Westenbarger's talking about, well, maybe we need to start to consider that maybe some of these people who went missing, their car didn't end up in a body of water. And I will be honest with you, behind the scenes, I'm working on just by myself, I'm working on a missing persons case on my own here in Pinellas County in Florida, where I've scoped out some bodies of water where I think this person and this person's car could be, given what I know about the disappearance. I've started to look into it. And I actually, last week, one day, jumped in the car and went to a couple of these locations. I'm just revealing this to everybody now. My assistants don't even know that. But his car has been found. And the circumstances, I only know what all of you know of who have read the news. I want you to know that once I did read the article, I did contact Eric's mother, Joanne, and I told her I was going to be talking about this tonight, and she's just not ready to talk about it yet. And I totally understand that. And so I'm just going to give her some distance. So I don't have any additional details regarding all of this, but from what the news says, and then I'll do try to analyze it for you, is that somebody in California within the last couple weeks had the VIN for Eric's car and ran a Carfax report. And I don't know I don't know who this person is. I don't know why this person is in California. I don't know anything at this point, but I'm just telling you what the article said. I don't know if this person has been doing this periodically or just happened to do this now. I don't know. But what the Carfax report said was that Eric's car had the oil changed in it on August 31st, I think the date was. And Joanne, this person who discovered this, sent this tip to Joanne, and she contacted, I think it was her daughter's husband, who is in the car business, who just happened to be up in Michigan. And they ended up finding where this car was, and that a new title had been printed for it in Michigan. And they found out where the car was, and they went to this place in a place called Clare, Michigan. Clare. Hello, Suzanne. Hello, Jolene. How are you? Good to see you tonight. Thanks for tuning in. So this son-in-law, maybe with Eric's sister or his wife, the son-in-law, I don't know if, once again, if it was Eric's, he's married to Eric's sister, I guess. I don't know. But they went to this address, and the guy was like, yeah, I just bought this car. I'm a guy who buys cars and as for charity and gives them to people who need transportation to get to work. And I bought it from an estate sale in Saginaw, Michigan. Guy had no idea that this was Eric Frank's car, had no idea that it was part of the disappearance, had no idea. But he was the one who got the title on it because he bought it, and I guess the seller told him there's no title to this car. So this guy who bought the car took this brother-in-law out into the garage, and there was Eric's car. Just sitting there. Fine as could be. However, the guy did admit that, and he has experience buying cars, and he does realize that some of the cars that he has bought in the past, people did die in them, maybe of heart attacks or overdoses or something like that. He did note that when he bought this car, there was kind of a smell in it, and something had happened on the passenger side, I guess in the front of the vehicle. He admitted that. Hello, Jill. And so, because of this, the police in Michigan came in and towed the car away. Now, you're probably wondering, where did he buy it from? Where was it this whole time? Well, what the guy said who bought the car, and I believe this guy is It seems to me that the reporter writing this believes this person. It seems the police believe this person. And I guess his story checks out as to what he does and doing these, buying these cars and for charity or however you want to put it. He bought it from an estate sale in Saginaw, Michigan, and he gave them the address. And wouldn't you know it, as far as the article says, this is an address that can be connected to Eric's former girlfriend, Kendra Firmingham, Firmingham. Of course, she was mentioned prominently during my interview with Eric's mother back in 2017. If you haven't listened to that episode, I would do so. Certainly do it now. So it seems that this car was in a garage at an address that could be connected to Kendra. Now, you should know, nowhere in the article is her husband named. Nowhere. But his name is John Carnes, Carnes. Now, what I did after talking to Joanne and her saying, you know what, I really don't want to talk about it right now. Totally fine, Joanne. If you're going to watch it, it's totally fine. I get it. But what I did was I went into a database that I use, that my assistants use for tracking addresses of where people lived or properties that they owned. And I have a subscription to this. Should know that as far as Kendra Firmingham goes, she is only connected to one address in Saginaw, and that was connected to a hair salon that she worked at or owned. That's it, as far as the database that I have. Whereas with John Carnes, he has several addresses going back to the 1990s that he was connected to, and it gives you like the time spans. Now, in the article, it says that where this car was found was in the garage at a property on the west side of Saginaw. Now, you should know that in checking that out, of course, I'm not a local, so I don't know exactly what west side means, but to me, it means anything west of what is considered to be the downtown Saginaw area. And I could really only find what you would call probably one address that was connected to John during this time. But the thing is, according to the database that I found, he was not at that address at the time of Eric's disappearance in 2011. Now, you may be asking, well, where did Kendra and John live at the time Eric disappeared in March 2011? Well, they lived on on Airport Road, and I think this came out in the interview, which is on the east side of Michigan, not the west. So it leads me to believe that they did not find this car on the property where Kendra and John were living at the time. Like I said, I only found one address that could be connected to John. That's on what I would call I found some to the north, some to the south, but there was only one directly to the west, and he had moved out of there seemingly well before Eric ever went to Michigan and well before Eric ever disappeared. So I guess what I'm saying at this point is I'm not sure what the location is. I don't know. What records they used to connect Kendra to this property, I don't know. It has to be probably some sort of local government information that may not be on the internet. That's certainly possible. And once again, they stressed that this was connected to Kendra Firmingham and not her husband, John. Now, you should know Kendra is deceased. And that's, of course, a big conspiracy right there as to whether she actually died or not. Once again, go back to the episode to listen to that. But she seemingly died of cancer in 2016. Whereas John is still alive, but he has not lived in Michigan for a while. He actually lives here in Florida in Ormond Beach, which is on the Atlantic side of Florida, not on the Gulf side where I live. So what does this all mean? How could it be that this car was sitting in this garage. Nobody tracked it down, even though it seems that this address, it seems right away, as soon as they found the car and found out where this guy bought it from an estate sale, which an estate sale could be a variety of things. It could be because, of course, somebody died and all of their possessions are being sold off. Hello, Touching. It could be that. It could be that the car was on a piece of property that went bankrupt. What do they call? When you can't pay your mortgage, you went into bankruptcy, or the bank takes it repossessed or something like that. The bank repossesses your house and everything in it. It foreclosed. Thank you, Angela. Foreclosed. I couldn't think of the word. I'm really good with words sometimes. Thank you, Angela. Hello, Brandy. It could be that. So it could be somebody who was deceased and the car just happened to be there and the person didn't have a will or anything, or it could be a property that got foreclosed on. It could be maybe a storage unit. Being that we don't know the address, it could be a storage unit that Kendra had that the payments weren't being made on it anymore. There are a variety, I think, possibilities here. A variety of possibilities, at least 3. I'm not sure which one it's going to be. Now, the big question is, well, if this is the case, and this is an address that could be connected to Kendra, and she's been deceased for 4 years, but still there's paperwork to connect her to it, even though she's been gone for 4 years, why is it that this location wasn't searched by police before? I think we have to think, being that we just did the in memoriam for Aundria Bowman, I think we have to think of it this way. There may not have been any probable cause for police to go onto that property. I think that makes some sense. They could believe that the car's on the property just as a hunch, but there's nothing that really leads them in that direction that's factual that would ever stand up in court. Very much like how Kathy Turkanian for 10 years said that Aundria's remains, or 9 years, that Aundria's remains, Alexis's remains, were on the Bowman property in Hamilton, Michigan. She suspected that, but there wasn't really any proof. She ended up being right, and that's fantastic. But there was no probable cause to get a warrant to go onto the property. It took Dennis being charged with another murder for that to happen. So it very well may be that we have been in a situation like this for Eric Franks' disappearance. That it may be that the police might think that the car was on there, but hello, Angela, the other Angela, and Whitney is in the house. It very well could be that they had suspicions, but had no hard evidence to that effect. That's something that comes to mind. Of course, the other choice is that they're just completely inept. That would be the other choice. I don't like thinking that way, but we know that there are several occasions that we've covered on Unfound where that has certainly been the case. We're not going to point fingers or anything else, but we do know that police investigators don't sometimes take these disappearances as seriously as they should. And it could be that the answer is just, a couple pages of information away and they just don't get to it. That is certainly possible as well. Certainly possible. I'm hoping that eventually, and it very well may be that Joanne already knows all of this. I don't know. But she may know some of this information already. And if she does, that's great. I'm glad she knows. But what I think this really, really, really shows, if this is all true, that the car was found on a property that could be connected to Kendra, is that surely she and I guess her husband, John, covered up Eric's disappearance. Now, it course, there's no proof that a murder was committed yet. Maybe it happened that Eric committed suicide in his car on their property, and for some reason they covered it up. I know that's, I know how that sounds, but I can think of at least one situation I know of when I was in Las Vegas where a woman who was a pro golfer committed suicide in Henderson. And when her much older, I think was he married maybe to another woman? I don't know. But he showed up because he hadn't heard from her in a few days. He showed up, found her that she had committed suicide, and he tried to make it look like it was an accident or something else. So these things happen. Even though I know that may sound a little outlandish, given what we know, if you will remember, what we talked about regarding Eric's disappearance. I think that's certainly a minority choice to think that they covered up a suicide. What is much more probable is that they certainly had something to do with this disappearance with the idea of foul play being number one. Now, why, if that is the situation, why would they just allow the car to sit in there all these years? Why would Kendra do that for the 5 years that she was alive after Eric disappeared? Why would John do that, allow that car to sit wherever it was for all those years? Maybe they thought it was never going to be found. I mean, it would eventually have to be found, right? I mean, if it wasn't going to be today or yesterday within the last few days, eventually something would have happened, I suppose. They could have crushed it. Kathy's saying here, I always wondered if Kendra, et cetera, had Eric's cars crushed. Guess not. Yeah, guess not, Kathy. But it's a good choice. It's certainly, Erica Blasco. Yeah, Erica Blasberg case, Indy. Yeah, you can, you don't have to retract that, Indy. No, that was the golfer. Yeah, that's right, Indy. Erica Blasberg was the golfer in Henderson who committed suicide, and that other guy in her life tried to make it look like something else. That's right. I was there. I lived there when that happened. It happened in Henderson. But at least I think I lived there. So why would they just leave that car there, sitting there, and then on the top of that, allow it to be sold? I think it's hard to say. I just don't know what to think. I don't know why whoever it was in California ran the Carfax. I don't know. We don't, of course, don't know whose estate it was that it was in, that was getting sold. There are just so many unknowns right now. There are still a lot of unknowns. I think we're going to find out quite a bit before it's all over. And I think that Joanne will probably be, let me know on a lot of this when she's ready to talk, and whatever I can say to all of you, I will. I'm guessing there will be at least some points that I will not be able to make public, probably. But this is just sometimes how things happen. That a person happens to do a Carfax at the right time, and this car that's some missing persons gets sold, and everything just kind of comes together. I'm guessing right at this time, even though there's no news of this, I'm guessing that law enforcement officials in Michigan right now are tracking down John Carnes here in Florida. I'm guessing that they called the local Ormond Beach Police Department and said, hey, can you go over to John Carnes' house? Would like to talk to him. I'm guessing that's happening right now. Probably has already happened. If they know that this location could be connected to Kendra, she's deceased. So, surely they're getting John. They're going to talk to him. I'm wondering if would they do that over the phone? I'm guessing maybe that somebody from the Michigan State Police or wherever it is will fly down here to Florida to talk to John about how that car ended up on Kendra's property. Or not Kendra's property, but an address that can be connected to her. And I want to stress, they didn't say an address connected to her husband, John. I think they ended up getting divorced, and I forget what the situation. I'm just going to keep calling him her husband. Once again, an address connected to her. They did not yet say John. So you just never know what's going to happen. Looking back at these disappearances that have been somewhat solved or completely solved that we've covered over the past 4 years, there have been some, I think, that maybe aren't a surprise. I don't think that Zoe Campos is totally a surprise. Maybe Christopher Hyde's is maybe not a surprise. Even though they haven't found the remains yet. With Laura Bible and Ashley Freeman, I don't think any of us were surprised to find out that when they did catch at least one of the guys that he said, yeah, they murdered him. I don't think anybody was surprised by that. On the other hand, situation with Crystal Morrison, I think we're fairly surprised. Esther Westenbarger, fairly surprised. This situation, I think it's even more surprising than both of those. To think that this car is still in one piece, it was in somebody's garage all this time, that it wasn't crushed, that it wasn't found in some lake with Eric inside it. I think that's very, very surprising. And I guess what I'm also saying is that it opens up the idea that all of these missing persons cases where the car is also missing, it very well could be that just because of paperwork snafus and everything else, these people's cars could be on the road somewhere. There was foul play. The person did go missing, but somebody sold their car and got another title for it, and just no, it didn't raise a red flag anywhere. Because I guess what I'm also saying is, it sounds to me, the way the article was written, now maybe Joanne may tell me something totally different, the way police explain it to her. The way it sounds to me, had this person in California not done this Carfax, this guy in Clare, Michigan would have bought the car, got a new title for it, sold it, and that would have been that. That's the way the article sounds. Now, if I get clarification on that it wouldn't have happened that way, then I will tell all of you. But once again, I posted the article in the discussion group. It's out there. All you have to do is Google Eric Franks now. It's going to be in the news section. It'll come up right away. You can read it for yourself. And I think that you will come to the same conclusion, that without this Carfax check, the car's oil getting changed in August, I just can't see how somebody would have stopped this. I think that guy would have had it and sold it to somebody, and they've been driving around, and everybody still would have been looking for Eric's car. That's the way it sounds to me. Maybe you will come to a different conclusion. Michelle says, my neighbor tried to buy Brandy's car from me. I told them there was no way to transfer the title of a missing person. I guess that's not true, Michelle. I guess that's not true. And Brandy says, I hope the cops find out. Brandy, I got to believe. I got to believe that if it is true that this location can be connected to Kendra, they can't deny that. They can't ignore that. It's out in public now. They can't ignore it. And being that she is not around anymore, the only other person to talk to is John. Maybe her daughter. Her daughter, I think, was old enough at the time to maybe understand everything that was going on. So what, and this just happened all today. Angela, how many cars fall between cracks? Law enforcement needs to fix this crack in the system. Yeah. I think, Angela, I don't know. Maybe this is just a unique situation. I don't know. I don't know. But I think that once again, if I get to talk to Joanne or maybe she'll want me to talk to her son-in-law who was very involved in this or somebody privately, I'll do that too. That maybe things didn't go exactly as this news report says. We know how many news reports aren't accurate. We've certainly found that out over the last 4 years. So there could be inaccuracies in the story, but I'm going to guess they got the main point right, is that it is Eric's car and it was sold from an estate sale at an address that could be connected to Kendra. I'm guessing they got all that right. And really that's the only part that matters. So, we can get into how the car, what exactly happened with the Carfax and everything, but the main point still stands that it does imply that Kendra and probably her husband did have something to do with Eric's disappearance. Now, if the car had been found on somebody else's property, if it was sitting out in the backyard or covered with a tarp, or somebody else was driving it around illegally, then I don't think that we could immediately jump to the conclusion that John and Kendra had something to do with Eric's disappearance. But being that the article says what it says, I think we can say that they probably did. Kathy says Kendra's daughter also had cancer. That's certainly that's true, Kathy. Angela, do you think the daughter knew? I don't know. We're going to find out, Angela. I think she wasn't like 3 years old when this happened. I forget how old she was, but I think she was to an age where kind of understands everything that's going on and certainly can, now at this age, look back at 2011 and maybe talk about what went on. I just don't know how forthcoming she has been over the last 9 years. I don't know. I think we talked about in the interview. I just don't remember. Michelle, I worked for a car dealership and transferred titles. Then they gave it to another man who insisted he could. Texas would not transfer the title. Maybe no one linked the VIN in the system. Michelle, unless the person is declared dead, then no problem. Don't know. The key to all this right now to me is this Carfax that was checked. Is this just some amateur sleuth who is doing this once in a while? I think the VIN to the vehicle has been out there. I don't think that was private information. So it just might have been something lucky because those Carfax reports are not free. I don't know. And why was it in California? I don't know. But I just wanted to come to you. I couldn't. I had to, of course, talk about this tonight. Absolutely. And I tried to get more information from Joanne, but she just said she wasn't ready to talk. And that was perfectly fine by me. Once again, as you are watching this video tonight, please give this show a thumbs up. Make sure you do that on the device that you are using to watch Unfound Live. And don't forget to do that. And if you're not a subscriber to the channel, please do that as well. So once we upload new videos, you'll be alerted right away. Jolene says, guess I'll find out when I try to put little Joe's old Ford in my name. You will find out, Jolene. Yes, Kathy. Kendra's daughter would be in her mid-20s now. Thank you for checking that, Kathy. Sheree is reminding to tell all of you about patreon.com/Unfound Podcast. I haven't even gotten to the poll and everything in the think tank from this past Sunday, Sheree. So I haven't even had a chance to talk about that because I wanted to lead off the program with this Eric Franks news. That's because of how big this news is. You're probably wondering, right about now, well, Ed, did you ever think that Eric and his car were going to, or at least he hasn't been found yet, but his car was going to be found? I would have to say the answer is yes. We have to remember something. The average age of a disappearance covered on Unfound is 17 years old. Eric's, although I know the last 9 years has been hell for his family, in Unfound Land, that doesn't even come close to the average age case. So until disappearances get to the point that they are the average age of the disappearances that we cover, I'm fairly hopeful that things are discovered, that they are solved. Now, the issue is that once they get past that average age, then I start to get a little more pessimistic as to what's going to happen. I'll admit it. So knowing that Eric's disappearance was 9 years old, I'm thinking, well, we still got 8 years to go before it's the average age of a case covered by Unfound. So a lot can happen in 8 years, and we can see how fast it can happen in just a few hours. So, I've entertained a different idea regarding Eric's disappearance. That could it be something happened at the motel? But I guess that's not going to be the situation, being that this car was found at an address that could be connected to Kendra. Either way, this always seemed like a disappearance that wasn't planned. And so as long as it's not planned, that means there are going to be mistakes, and it's eventually something is going to break. It just might not, break soon enough. But I'm always hopeful. Suzanne says, huge news on this case. Absolutely. Absolutely, Suzanne. Huge. And I guess on top of that, being that it seems like something happened in the car, that is also a big thing as well. What if they'd gotten the car and it was completely pristine? What I'd like to know is if there was any mileage records that Joanne or somebody could find from when he had the car in Ohio before he drove up to Michigan to see his daughter. And I'd like to know how many miles were put on that car in the last 9 years. Was somebody driving it? Or did it sit there? Does it seem like the mileage, like there's only a few hundred miles put on it, and did it just sit there? Which, if that's the situation, they were trying to hide it. Absolutely 100% trying to hide it. Now, why they didn't get it crushed or something, if somebody did kill him and they wanted to cover up, I don't know if we're ever going to know that. I think we're eventually going to know it. We just don't know that today. All right. So that's big news on Eric Frank's disappearance. I want to move on to something else. Being that I'm going to be doing a video for Cleashindra Hall tomorrow that I will post right here on the YouTube channel. I've been going back and kind of just going over my notes from way back then, because I keep the notes from all the conversations I have with everybody, and they're in one of my computers, one of them, either one or the other. And in doing so, I wanted to update my knowledge on it. And regarding Cleashindra Hall, you will remember that she was working at this guy's house, Larry Amos, and she was supposed, even though it was just a very short walk, she was supposed to call to get picked up to be brought home. And of course, she didn't call, and she disappeared. And in reviewing my knowledge of the case, I found out now something that, if you ever listened to that episode, it was something that came out after I interviewed her mother, Laurel. And that is, when we talked about Larry Amos, her boss at the time, that we only talked about the child that he had that lived at the house. And it was, the son was only like 4 years old or something. What I did not find out until after we did the interview, the episode came out, and it must have been weeks, if not months later. See, this is the kind of mistake that I don't think today I would make, or we would, I was just doing the program by myself at the time. I don't think I would make it now. I don't think my assistants would make it now. That he actually had another son who was like just a couple years older than Cleashindra. But the thing is, the son did not live at that address. And a listener, like I said, maybe a couple months after the episode came out, alerted me to this and showed me that just a few years after Cleashindra disappeared in 1994, Larry Amos's 20-something-year-old son had been charged with assault and battery or something like that. And I asked Laurel if she knew about this. I forget what she said at the time, but obviously that raised a lot of red flags for me and put that guy's the kid's name, the guy's name is Omar Amos with 2 R's, Omarr Amos, Amos. And he is still my number one suspect in her disappearance. And in fact, but what I discovered today in going over my notes from back then, so I can talk when I do the map video, that I can talk about it with some knowledge, because like I said, I got 180 some disappearances knocking around up here. It turns out that Omar Amos, my number one suspect in her disappearance, is now deceased. He was murdered back in July. So like 2 months ago, not quite 2 months ago. He was at his residence. He's in his 40s now. I think he was 21 in 1994. So that would have made 21 plus 26. He was 47 years old. He was at his home in Nebraska Street, on Nebraska Street in Pine Bluff, Arkansas. Some guy went in there, shot him, murdered him. So if he did do something to Cleashindra Hall, we may now never know, because of course he can't be interviewed now. Now, I don't know. I really don't know if the police ever did interview him in the last 26 years. I don't know. But I just wanted to tell you all of that as well. So, and I will be mentioning this again when I do Cleashindra's the map video tomorrow. I will be mentioning this again. But this is another situation where somebody was walking a very, very short distance, or was waiting to get picked up, was supposed to call her parent to come pick her up. And if I remember correctly, Laurel fell asleep. And when her husband got home, hey, aren't you supposed to go pick Cleashindra up? She jumps in the car, drives over there. And Larry Amos and his wife are there. And they're like, she left. I don't know what to tell you. And some years ago, there was a warrant served on the house at the Amos residence. Nothing was found. So I just wanted all of you to know that my number one suspect in Cleashindra Hall's disappearance, Omar Amos, is deceased. My best guess is that even though there were stories out there, and even Laurel herself said that, well, he wasn't welcome over to his father's. Well, parents say a lot of things to cover up for their children. Was he allowed? Wasn't he allowed? He was certainly living somewhere else. But that doesn't mean he couldn't come over. And it very well may be that at some point in the past, he had been over to his father's and saw Cleashindra working there and said, oh, she's cute. A couple years younger than I am. I'm going to check her out. And maybe knew when Cleashindra was her work schedule or something and was kind of stalking her. I'm totally open to that. No proof of that, but I think it makes a lot of sense. And it certainly makes sense given Omar's criminal record that started a few years later. LaFord says, I think about this case all the time. Cleashindra's case, LaFord. Yeah, get it. It's a stumper. Brandy, so many missing people. It's so sad. It is. LaFord, yep, mine too, and then a cover-up. She seemed like such a promising, sweet girl. LaFord, I totally agree with you. Totally. Beth, was the assault on a female? I thought for sure Larry Amos was guilty. The assault was on a female, Beth. And it happened, once again, I think in 1997, so like 3 years later. And I can see why people would think that Larry Amos was guilty. Certainly threw around that idea back at the time. And he may be just guilty in another way. Maybe he knew what his son did and, and hushed it all up. A lot of parents doing that for their kids out there. We know that in disappearances. Parents will lie for their children. They're murdering children. They'll do that. So you just tell me that she was working for a guy that had a son around Cleashindra's age who eventually had proclivities to assault women. That seems like a pretty good choice to me. Kathy says, I think Omar's the number one choice in this case. Maybe now that he's deceased, maybe they'll start looking into it a little bit more. I don't know. Angela says, search son's property. Well, it's interesting you mentioned that, Angela, because I think he's been living at the same address since the 1990s. So that might not be a bad idea. I've not checked that property on. I'll probably include that now that you say that in the map video. But I've not checked it yet to see how big it is or anything else, Angela. But that's a pretty good idea. So there you go. A couple things going on. Big thing in Eric Franks' disappearance. And I want to let you know of the death of a possible suspect in the disappearance of Cleashindra Hall. All right, let's talk about some of the general items that we usually cover on this show. First of all, we're an hour in and I haven't even talked about the polls yet. I put out 2 polls, being that there were 2 episodes this past Friday. What'd you think about that? Getting 2 episodes on a Friday. How about that? Suzanne Lau, practically everybody, not quite everybody, but almost everybody believes that somebody was waiting for her in the parking lot on the Albany campus. I agree. That makes the most sense for sure. Then as far as Alexis Badger, I'm now referring to her as her original name. We're not going to be using Aundria Bowman anymore, but Alexis Badger. Every person who answered in that poll does believe that Dennis has killed others besides Alexis and Kathleen Doyle. The people believe that he's a serial killer, and it would not surprise me at all within the next year, a couple years, that he is connected to some other murders or disappearances in Michigan or elsewhere, anywhere else he might have lived. We have to remember that Kathleen Doyle, she was not murdered. He did not murder her in Michigan. She actually was in Virginia. I think it was Virginia Beach. And he murdered her in Virginia Beach in 1980. And I wrote extensively. Of course, I've written extensively over the last 4 years about Alexis's disappearance for a book, and then in a blog last year. And then this past weekend, I had the chance to write about it again. Kind of focusing on Dennis's wife. Did she know what happened? Was she an accessory after the fact? I have to believe that she was an accessory at least after the fact. And I'm guessing the reason that she hasn't been charged yet is because there's no evidence to connect her to Alexis's death or murder. We also have to remember something else before we get too ahead of ourselves regarding Alexis's death and Dennis Bowman being charged with her murder. Just because, we have to remember this, just because he murdered Kathleen Doyle, they had DNA evidence, and he pled guilty to that, does not mean that it's an automatic slam dunk that they will successfully prosecute him for Alexis's murder. There still has to be proof. And I'm sure if he's not going to plead guilty, that he's going to get some defense attorney to say, well, Alexis had a heart attack and we buried her on the property. Alexis had an accident and we didn't kill her, and I didn't kill her, and we buried her on the property, on and on and on. I think we have to be prepared for that. And so I'm hoping, I guess what I'm also hoping is that the remains that they found, that there is proof that she was murdered. Now, the remains have been in the ground for 31 years. And we already know In other situations, Tom Brown comes to mind that his remains were having problems determining a cause of death. So we have to prepare ourselves for those possibilities. If Dennis Bowman is going to plead not guilty and this is going to go to a trial, we have to prepare ourselves for this. LaFord says it was like Christmas in September. Suzanne, for 2 episodes, well, you're welcome, LaFord. Suzanne, I think his wife knew. I think she had to know, but I'm guessing that she's probably has a lawyer now and is just saying, well, I didn't know what to think, but I didn't want to think the worst of my husband, and I was afraid of him. That's probably, I'm guessing that's what she's saying behind the scenes. So those were the polls for this week. Next item, let's answer some questions. I haven't even answered a question yet. I kind of feel bad for all that. Because I got some good ones tonight. Angela says, can't they get him for doing something to her remains? Maybe. Angela, it just depends. We have to remember something. I know in the 21st century or 20th century, burying your dead daughter or son or loved one on the property without paperwork or something is fairly odd. But 1700s, 1800s, that was commonplace. That was nothing unusual about that. I know that, granted, I think I'm really stretching here. I do believe that Dennis Bowman killed Alexis. I do believe that it had to do with her talking to somebody at her school about being abused. I believe all of that. But it's not what, to quote Tom Cruise in A Few Good Men, it's not what I believe, it's what I can prove. And they better have proof. Touching. Robert Durst killed a man in Texas and cut up his body and threw it in the bay, and he got charged with the murder. He said he did it in self-defense and was found not guilty. Yep. I know. It happens. Touching, it happens. Let's answer a question. Angela asked me, Angela, who's in here tonight, there's 2 Angelas, but one of them, asked me, how many novels and short stories have I written? This is, of course, a question that's nothing to do with Unfound, but that's totally acceptable. I have written... Let me see how many novels. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 novels. The first one was in 1997 when I was still living in Pennsylvania. I wrote a murder mystery about in a place that was like where I grew up in Gilpin Township. I changed all the names and everything, but I used the terrain, the roads, the different people that I knew in the area to construct this murder mystery about the township chief of police who gets murdered. He's on a call and he gets murdered. And so a new guy who moved away from the area gets hired to come back, become the chief of police, and he's responsible for trying to figure out what happened. It's pretty good. Pretty good for a first shot. And then it was years later that I wrote 3 more novels that kind of are all connected, but they're each a novel in of themselves, given the length. And then I wrote another standalone novel. No, 6 novels. There's another one too. I forgot about that one. And then I wrote 2 more after that. One is kind of like a disc golf mystery having to do with disc golf. And then the other one is what you would call straight up science fiction about things happening on another planet. So I've written about 6 novels. That's a lot of words. I'm very thankful that I know how to type. I can type very fast. And as far as short stories go, I've written many, but not recently. Most of my short story writing occurred when I still lived in Pennsylvania. Kind of wrote a bunch of short stories. Didn't have them professionally edited or anything. Just write to write, just doing something at home. Just getting myself in the mood, kind of working up to writing that first novel about that mystery concerning my hometown. Now, as far as screenplays go, when I was in independent filmmaker, I did many of those too. I probably wrote 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of those, of all variety of different styles and kinds and everything else. Like I tell all of you, I'm a hermit. I had time to write all this stuff because I just spend a lot of time at home and I type fast. So I've done a lot of writing in the last 20 some years, but I should say that English was my favorite subject where you get to do creative writing in high school. And then in college, although I did not get the greatest grades, anytime that I had to write a paper for a business class or a statistics class or something like that, I always got A's. Now, taking tests and things, something else. But if there was a report or a study or something that I had to do, I was always good at those. So that's just my strong suit. That's just how my mind works. Touching says, that sounds so interesting. The mystery from my hometown. It was a good story. It's in one of these computers around here, on one of these external hard drives. It's around here somewhere. Twinkle says, Ed's a prolific writer. I guess I am. It's easy to write, like I said, when you stay at home a lot and you don't have any kids and everything else. It's easy to do that. Angela, hermit who plays disc golf. Ever heard of that before? That's just who I am. Yeah. So I would say probably 7 novels. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And maybe I'm forgetting one in there. So let's just say 7. And probably about the same amount of short stories. But like I said, going way back to before I even moved to Las Vegas. And then as far as screenplays, many, 10 at least. So there you go. Let's answer another question while I'm at it, being that I'm down toward the bottom of this. Kim asked me, speaking of disc golf, Angela, how much does a golf disc weigh? Well, we play the funny thing is we play the sport in feet. So a basket is 300 feet away, unlike ball golf, which is, of course, in yards, 250 yards, 300 yards. We play it in feet because we can't throw the discs as far as professional ball golfers can hit a ball. But when it comes to the weight of the discs, they are in the metric system. So they are by grams and not ounces. And for tournament play, your discs can only weigh a certain amount, and it depends on the diameter of them. The wider the diameter, the heavier they can be, with the max weight being 180 grams. You're saying, well, how much is 180 grams? 180 grams is about 0.38, about 0.39 of a pound. So about 4/10 of a pound, or to put it another way, they are about 6.5 ounces, something like that. Although that doesn't sound very heavy, and are not. But you should know, on the other hand, if you have a Frisbee that you take to the beach to throw back and forth, that thing probably only weighs 130 grams, if not less. Even though it's big, those big, what we call pie plate, they're really large in diameter, like, or even ultimate. If you watch Ultimate Frisbee, they're really wide, but those discs are light compared to their size. Whereas our discs are smaller, but they're heavier. They have much more mass. What this means is you don't want to get hit by one of these. If you were to get hit by one of these in the head, because they're sharp, it would kill you. It would certainly kill you. I've never been hit by one. I've seen guys who have been hit by one, in their legs, in elsewhere. It's not pretty. It's not pretty. Your decent player can throw one of these discs about 60 miles an hour out of the hand, and they're sharp. So they can be dangerous. But that's how much they weigh. They're made out of a variety of plastics. But like I said, and you can get a wider range. You can get some discs that go down to like 135 grams for disc golf. You can do that, but in the wind, they get really, really shaky. So usually my discs that I throw are like 165 grams and up. And yes, just a few grams here and there can make all the difference. So I throw anywhere from 165 grams up to 180 grams. So that's how much they weigh. Once again, 175, 180 grams. The max weight is roughly around 0.38, 0.39, 0.4 of a pound. So like just under 4/10 of a pound, or approximately 6.3, 6.4 ounces. And do the discs have a weight in like boxing? No. Well, no, Angela, what it is the manufacturers, being that they want their discs to be used in tournaments, they only manufacture them to those weights. Although mistakes are made once in a while. In fact, there was a big one just earlier this year that I heard about where discs got out that were much heavier than that. The manufacturers themselves police themselves for this. And really, there is an advantage to a disc being heavier, but they're heavier and heavier as far as wind is concerned. But it gets to the point of diminishing returns. So a heavier disc isn't necessarily better, and a lighter disc isn't necessarily better. So you just have to pick out the discs that are best for you on how you throw, what your game is within the rules that the PDGA, the Professional Disc Golf Association, mandates. And trust me, no manufacturer wants to get caught making discs that are heavier and, marking them as 180 grams when they're really 190. They can get in big trouble for that. Nobody wants to do that. It's just not worth it. So we don't have any weigh-ins. No, everybody's, it's golf. Everybody's on their best behavior. We police our own. Indy says, murder by disc golf. That's kind of what my disc golf mystery was about, Indy. Funny you should mention. I wrote that novel. I wrote a novel about disc golf. I don't know how good it is. You'd have to understand the game to understand everything, but I think it's pretty good. No helmets out in the course, Suzanne. That would be totally uncool. No Unfound helmet. No, Suzanne, disc golf is getting to be bigger around Mississippi, but none will let kids under 13 years old play. I don't know, Suzanne. We get a bunch of 10-year-olds and 8-year-olds out there for some of these tournaments, so I don't get that. I don't know how to answer that. Just don't know what to say to that. That's weird. All right, let's go back to this. Another Jody Husentrut podcast episode is out. I got to listen to it. Was it this past weekend when I think it was when I was up in Brooksville / Floral City, and it has to do with Jody's car. So I think you should check that out. They get into the depths of her car and how she got it just before she disappeared, and why the car, when she disappeared, why the car was still in somebody else's name. They get into all of that. I found it very interesting. I think they're doing a nice job with that podcast. And I think what it does open up is the idea that could there have been somebody connected to the sale of that car that ended up stalking her? Being that she had to go into a dealership to fill out the paperwork and probably pay some fees and other things to get the title transferred and everything, being that we're just talking about Eric Franks' car. Could it be that there was somebody at that dealership who took a liking to her and said, hey, that's that Jody Husentrut from TV, and kind of got infatuated with her and started stalking her? I think that is something that can be investigated all these years later. Try to find out who some of the people were that were working at these dealerships or this dealership, and find out if any of them have any violent history since 1995 when she disappeared. But I hope you will check that out. Once again, just go to findjody.com to listen to that episode. I think all of them have been really good so far. However, I will say that the one in which the death of Jody's friend, and I can't remember his name right now, but it was deemed as being suspicious. But this person did forensic analysis on it. I'm not going to ruin it, but I thought that was really, really, really good. Just blown away. Even as a guy who's been following Jody's disappearance for, 20 years, that one was really, really good. So please check out the Find Jody podcast at findjody.com. Well, Ford says, yes, that is a very good podcast. I think they're doing a nice job with it. A little bit different than what we do at Unfound, but the information on it, and that's what I'm always most concerned about, is certainly top rate. Angela, they recently found a body on a disc golf course in Colorado. Some people were thinking it was Suzanne Morgan. Haven't heard the outcome. That's news to me. I think it is. I think I would hear that. Okay. Like I've said about YouTube videos, I've done some new ones recently. I hope you watched the Kelly Rothwell one, where I diagrammed where her car was found and where she was living and where I've lived, like right south of where she disappeared from. And now I live north of where she disappeared from. And I go by where she used to live all the time. I go by where her car was found all the time. And that post office that I use is right there. So it's a little creepy. Suzanne Lyles, of course, I did a video for that. Joshua Guimond, I did a video for that one as well. And like I said, within the next day or two, please look for videos concerning Brandy Wells and Cleashindra Hall. And I may do one for Shane Fell, because some of these I've actually done videos for them all. So I'm having to go back and check, did I already do a video for this one? Does it need to be updated? So we already have Brandy Wells, the episode on YouTube, and we have some of the security video from the night she disappeared, but I'm going to do one where I diagram where she was, where her car was found, where the phone was found, etc. And then Cleashindra about these different locations. And I may do one within the next couple of days for Shane Fell as well. It just depends on how much. I might have already done one for Shane Fell, though. I'm thinking I did. I'll have to check that. But there you go. So be looking for those. And once again, if you are a subscriber to the channel, it will automatically alert you when those videos are uploaded. Cherie says, yes, right, Angela, because Barry Morphew did some work on that disc golf field, did he? I did not see that. Cherie, if you can find that article, please send it to me. I will take a look at it. I want to talk about this. I know that is it a general or somebody like that at Fort Hood. The leadership there has been dismissed, given everything that has gone on at Fort Hood, seemingly over the past year between murders and disappearances and everything. And I was reading this, and it was saying, I was reading an article that says, Fort Hood has the highest, it has the most cases for sexual assault and harassment and murders for our entire formation of the U.S. Army. And what I guess more than any other base in the U.S. Army, this particular one has more of these types of crimes than any other. And I'm reading that they're going to be having some hearings regarding this. Some of the leadership at Fort Hood has been dismissed or let go or resigned. And what do I think? What do I think's going on there? First of all, you have to remember, I've never been in the military, so I'm not even going to attempt to describe the military lifestyle. I don't know what that's like. I think we have to be open-minded to a couple different possibilities here. It very well may have been a leadership problem, and not just right there at the tippy top, but kind of filtering down to, once again, I don't even know how the rankings work, but corporals and captains and majors and everybody else. I couldn't even tell you the hierarchy of the military. And I even know it varies from like the Army to the Marines, to the Air Force, to the Navy. Of course, the Navy doesn't have any generals. They have admirals. But it very well have been some leadership issue where discipline was a breakdown. Very possible. It also could be a situation where there were, you have to remember something, and I'm not here to, the military, like anything else in life, is just made up of humans. The fact is that soldiers and Marines and sailors and aviators and airmen, they commit crimes too. They're not perfect. I'm not here to disparage the military. I'm a huge supporter of the military, even though I've never served. But they're human too. And it very well could be that you just have a couple bad eggs, and then some other men and women who get moved to Fort Hood, they might have been bad eggs too. They might not have been bad eggs, but they get there, they get around those bad eggs that are already there, and it kind of creates this snowball. I'm open to that as well. On the other hand, when it comes to statistics, this could be just a statistical anomaly. Remember, as I tried to explain, I forget what case it was or example, but I explained like Fallon, Nevada, many, many years ago. There was an outbreak of child cancer, some rare form of cancer that was showing up in children in Fallon, Nevada. And all these scientists and investigators and went in there and trying to figure out, is it in the water? It is in the land. And to this day, 15 years later or something, they still have no idea why these particular children caught this disease, this cancer. Was it Hodgkin's disease or something like that? And they couldn't figure it out, and why these other children didn't. And I've made the point regarding that is it could be just a statistical anomaly. Remember, we only pay attention to the statistics generally, especially when it comes to health, that bother us. All right. Whereas what I was making the point at the time is there could be some other place, little town in the United States where it's exactly the opposite, that they're way under the average of children getting some type of cancer. Well, statistically, they're both the same, but we don't care about children who don't get cancer because we're all happy with that. We don't study that. We only study children who do get cancer. So the kids that get cancer get all the attention. They get the news. And why is this happening? Whereas statistically, both are the same. There is something that's way under the average, and something that's way above the average. And it very well could be that this is just some sort of statistical anomaly. There may be another base in the U.S. Army that has as many people on it, and they are under the average when it comes to assaults and harassment and murder and everything else. But statistically, it's the same. And that's something I think is very hard for the public to understand regarding that. Because once again, what we care about is we want murders to stop. We want harassment to stop. We want disappearance to stop. We want all these bad things to stop. But we forget that it very well could be that there's another place that's under the average. And what this is it's just everything coming together when it comes to statistics. It'd be no different than some city being way, 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 way above the average regarding murders, and we all want to stop it. And we know there are places in the United States like that. And then we have other cities that are way, way, way under the average per, 1,000 murders. And we all think, well, look how peaceful those cities are. Well, it may be a statistical situation and not exactly an environmental situation. Just don't know. But that's why they're doing this. That's why they're going to look into this, and they're going to try to figure out, was there something going on at Fort Hood that is exacerbating this? An environment there, a leadership issue, a morale issue, a public health issue, a mental health issue. They're going to look, I guess they're going to look into all of that. But it would not surprise me. I'm just warning you all right now. It would not surprise me that when this is all done, everybody being, well-meaning and everything else, and they just say, we just don't know. Because that's what they did in Fallon, Nevada with child cancer. And that would surely be easier to figure out than what's going on in an Army base. These things happen. It sucks, but it happens. Twinkle says, note to self, don't move into the Fort Hood area. Well, I don't know what to say about that, Twinkle. I just don't know. Fort Hood is huge. I visited it last year when my kid got deployed. Angela, sexual harassment has been institutionalized, and more women in military are taxing old rules. I'm not sure I know what that means, Angela. Brandy says, good point, Ed. All I'm saying is we just shouldn't jump to conclusions. Don't jump to conclusions regarding any of this. All these things that have been reported are certainly horrible, but we also have to remember that there is a sensational element to this. Because now that, a few of these things happen, and then what does the media do? They have all the spotlights on Fort Hood. Everything's a spotlight on Fort Hood. A couple of disappearances. Of course, that one young woman that got Vanessa Guillen, who got murdered. And now all the spotlight is right there on Fort Hood. So no wonder anything bad that happens gets into the news. Whereas nobody has a spotlight over here at Fort Bragg. Nobody over here has a spotlight on this, just on Fort Hood. So no wonder we know about everything bad that's happening there. Whereas nobody's paying attention to maybe other things that are happening on other bases. We just don't know. It's like I said, I think from the average person point of view, that may be hard to understand. But this is something I try to keep in mind when I look at disappearances. Is something bad really going on here? Or is it something else? Is this something that is manufactured? Or is it real? Is this something that is on purpose? Or is it just a function of statistics? And that's why we just can't take these things for granted. That's why studies are done on all sorts of these things and trying to figure out the true cause of them. And it bothers me sometimes when people just start jumping to conclusions regarding all this when they really don't know what's going on. There's a reason that studies are done. And there's a reason we just don't jump to conclusions regarding things. Cherie says 28 deaths unrelated to combat on a base in the States is a lot. We'll find out why. I hope they find out why. I'm not saying it's not bad. It sounds like a lot to me, but until we really know, get into there and people going on the base and talking to people and going through records and everything else, I just don't know if we're, I'm not going to be so quick as to say, oh yeah, it's this huge systemic problem and everything else. I just don't know. All right. Let me answer another question. Misty emailed me and asked me a question about Stephen Kocher's phone records. And specifically, if you remember when I did that Stephen Kocher episode, and all I did in that episode in August of 2017 was talk about my experience in Las Vegas when that disappearance happened. I've never interviewed anybody in Stephen's family. I really didn't even go over a lot of the facts regarding his disappearance. I just talked about it from what I remember my experience. But one of the experiences that I had while I was there was I went down to, what was it, Channel 8 or whatever it was, and I was shown phone records for Stephen Kocher. And so what Misty is asking me is that the way I explained that is these were the most unique phone records that I had ever seen. And she's asking me, are you then saying that since you've started Unfound, you've never seen records like the ones that you were shown back in what would have been sometime in 2010? Misty, if you were watching tonight, the answer is yes, but I want to explain why that is. When we talk about phone records on Unfound, we're usually talking about phone numbers, times, dates, and you see, like we're all familiar with our phone bills for our cell phones. We can go online, check them. Maybe we get them in our email, or we get the paper kind. This says all the people we talked to, all the people we texted, all the data usage we had watching Netflix or whatever else on our phones, YouTube, whatever else, even using data to listen to Unfound if you listen on your phone on whatever app. We are familiar with those records. The records that I saw for Stephen Kocher were not those. They were not records in the fact that they were like this. Instead, these were records of where his phone had pinged, what towers his phone was using at the time it was used. And I never saw anything like that before. I've never seen anything like that since. And to this day, this guy who worked at the news station, I don't ever remember him. I don't remember him explaining how he even got them. The reason I only knew him is because I was on Web Sleuths at the time. He was on Web Sleuths at the time, and he invited me down to the TV station to show them to me. So I was right there in the newsroom, and that was pretty cool. And so these were the records of the phone pings. And what you learn is that each cell phone tower has a name. And it usually has to do with like the road that it's on, the road that it's nearest, or an intersection, or if it's in a park, if, one of these cell phone towers that they make it look like a tree, but it's not. If it's in a park, that's the name it'll have. If it's near a particular intersection, that's the name it'll have. And so using that, you were able to see where his phone was pinging and where he was driving, where he was at the time that he was talking. And I remember kind of just remembering this mind, and I went to each of those towers in Las Vegas to check out their exact locations. And it was interesting. But still, I've never seen any phone records like that before. So all of you, if you've never seen anything like that, I can assure you that when we talk about pings on episodes, those kinds of records look different than your usual phone records. At least that's the way they looked 10 years ago. So it was very interesting. It's something that I keep in mind. And as you know, for these more recent disappearances, sometimes we have ping information, sometimes we don't. So, of course, in Steven's disappearance, those ping records to this day still seem to be very, very important. And all I can tell you is what I remember about seeing those ping records of where he was is it seems he did take a fairly direct route from coming into Las Vegas from the Northeast, from Utah, going down the 15 and going directly to that Evening Lights road drive, whatever it was, where he parked his car. It didn't seem to me like he stopped anywhere or went out of his way or anything else. It seemed like he knew exactly where he was going. And this is something that still stumps me to this day, is that how did he know where he was going? How did he know to go to that address? Because there was no address found in his car. He had a phone that did not have GPS on it. He didn't have a Garmin, which you might have had back at the time. He didn't have anything like that. Nothing like that. So how did he end up on that street? How did he know to go to that address? Even if somebody gave him that address and said, go to this address and park here, how do you get to that address? He didn't have a map, nothing. It's still a stumper to me. Unless somebody went into his car after the fact and took those things out, which I don't believe. But how did he end up on that street? in the first place. If he was actually meaning something, I mean, we can be given addresses all day, but that doesn't necessarily mean we know how to get to that address. It's a good question. I still don't know what the answer is. Cherie had sent me this before we got started. I guess today, I did not follow, and I haven't followed this as closely as some of you have. Letecia Stauch, of course, the stepmother of Gannon Stauch, who she seemingly murdered back, and I think it was February of this year. February seems such a long time ago, doesn't it? Given everything that's gone on, it's crazy. She has been found competent to stand trial, which I think that is good for everybody who wants to see her prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. That came out today. If you will remember, it is believed she killed her husband's son for some reason, jealousy or something, and then put Gannon seemingly in a suitcase, and on her way to drive to South Carolina, I think it was, she dumped him off some sort of bridge off the highway in Florida or Alabama, something like that. But his remains were found, I think, because at that point they were already tracking her. But she has been found competent to stand trial, and I thank Cherie for letting me know about that. What's all of you? What is everybody writing here? Twinkle says, at my age, I better stay away from that all crazy traffic. I'm a maniac enough myself without adding other drivers. Okay, Twinkle. Brandy says, I'm from Kentucky. A lot of people have disappeared here. I don't doubt it. Brandy. Angela says, do you know Suzanne Lysel's? That's funny. Suzanne Lyle's boyfriend had any domestic abuse or assault since she's gone missing? No, I don't think he has, Angela. I can remember at some point, I don't know if it was during the interview that I did with Mary, but at some point I know I've asked her that, and the answer is no. He got married sometime in the early 2000s, and I think he's still married. I don't know if he has any kids or not, but I think he's still married, 18 to 15, 18 years later. Pretty sure. And he has, the way I remember it, a pretty big job and some important job in some IT company, computer company, which shouldn't be any surprise to anybody. So, not to my knowledge, Angela. Jasmine says Stephen Kocher might have gone to that location before. Jasmine, that's what I personally believe. I have no proof of that. But being that Stephen was driving around and nobody seemed to be keeping track of where he was going. It seems he was doing a lot of driving that nobody knew about. That's my best choice too, Jasmine. I just want you to know. Kathy says he could have put directions in his pocket. He could have, Kathy. But I just wonder if that's the natural thing for a person to do. Back in the days before, of course, I have Waze on my phone, or that's what I usually use. But before that, people would write directions down, but usually they put it like on the passenger seat, and then when you get out of the car, the directions are still sitting there. Like I said, maybe somebody went back out to his car later and got them to try to cover everything up. I'm open to that. But I don't think it's natural necessarily for somebody to write these directions out. You got them on the passenger seat. You're looking at them. Okay, I got to make a right here, make a left here, do this. And then at that point that you get out of your car, you stick the directions in your pocket. I think most people just leave the directions sitting on the seat. Cherie, Gannon remains found in Florida by complete accident. Unfortunately, law enforcement was not following her. I thought she was being tracked or something, Cherie. I thought that they already had their eyes on her from the beginning, very early on. And so when she went there, they kind of were following her somehow or something. Once again, I'm not an expert on it, and I could be totally wrong, but my only point was what Cherie wrote me, saying that she is competent to stand trial. Touchy says, was Stephen Kocher the one who disappeared and his car was found in a strange place? Well, his car was found. I don't know if you'd call it a strange place. It was just sitting in in a turnaround or a circle in Henderson, Nevada, in what we call the Anthem area, an area that I was very familiar with. I wouldn't call it a strange place. If it had been parked out in the middle of the desert, I don't know. But it was in a place that nobody knew how he got there or why he was there. And so that's maybe what makes it strange. But it was just in a neighborhood, and an upscale neighborhood at that. I mean, the average price of a house in the area where he parked his car, I'm going to guess in 2010 was like $400,000, something like that. So, but it was found in this neighborhood. Of course, he's still missing. The belief is that his landlord up in St. George did something to Stephen, set him up. That's my guess. Something was going on there. Stephen was doing work for him, illegal work, and something happened. What do I want to talk about next? Indy says, love how effortlessly we can go from topic to topic. Really interesting show tonight. Well, just keep it flowing, Indy. I come here with an agenda. That's why I'm always looking over to my left. I do not do this off the top of my head. I usually put in at least an hour on a Wednesday putting this outline together, things I want to talk about. And I love the questions too. Just a couple things. Did you all see that Carol Baskin from Tiger King or whatever it's called is going to be on Dancing with the Stars? I think that this is a travesty. It is everything that is wrong with true crime and everything that is wrong with reality TV put together. We should not be glorifying these types of people. I don't know if she had anything to do, what was it, with her husband's disappearance, but let's just call it for what it is. Dancing with the Stars is doing this for ratings. And I guess they will put anybody on there. Anybody. Who's next? OJ? I think it's disgusting. I think it is the most disgusting. And I didn't even watch the show. I'd certainly love to cover the disappearance if we could do it in a non-sensational way and stay away from all the craziness with it. Of course, it's a disappearance right here in Florida. It all happened not far from where I live. I'd love to cover it. But it just shows you how people will do anything for ratings. Anything. Doesn't matter how insulting it is. Doesn't matter who they're going to tick off. Doesn't matter that the person could be a murderer. Doesn't matter. And the truth is, Dancing with the Stars, people are going to watch and they're going to get away with it. I think this is a huge cultural problem we have in the United States. I'm just going to speak for my own country. I'm not going to speak for any other. But these are the types of things about our pop culture that are disgusting. Disgusting. And just can't take it. I've never watched, I would never watch Dancing with the Stars anyway. But, where is the line in the sand? I guess the question is, who won't they have on the program? If they'll have her on, who won't they have on the program? So I just wanted to mention that. I just wanted to know that I saw all of that. I'm disgusted by it. It's everything that is wrong, once again, with true crime and the glorification of these people and giving them all this attention and showing how quirky they are and everything. It is everything that is wrong with the coverage of real crimes that affect people in the United States. And it's horrible reality TV. And in fact, I wrote here in my notes, I'm reminded of the book. It was a book first, most people don't even realize that, but the book / film, The Running Man, with Arnold Schwarzenegger. That was a book that was originally written by Stephen King, if you didn't know. And what's it about? It's about reality TV. Stephen King got it right like 15 years before we started with all the Survivor stuff and everything else. And what was the Running Man doing? Arnold Schwarzenegger, these people, of course he was supposed to be a murderer. He wasn't, not to ruin the plot. But they would put people on TV who were murderers, and these hunters would track them down. And people would watch. Richard Dawson was the game show host. And the reason it got so much attention at the time is because everybody thought, oh, that's just so crazy. And now here we are. We have a person that many people believe is a murderer on a reality show. little could Stephen King have known. How could he ever known? It's the Running Man. We've gotten to that point. I mean, 2020 has been at least the most bizarre year in my life, and this just kind of puts it on top of everything else. It's disgusting. And at least the Running Man was just fiction. This is reality. It's disgusting. But they're going to get away with it. I'm going to get away with it. A lot of people are saying won't be watching. Michelle, 48 Hours Suspicion has some show on Tiger King's competition's husband's death on right now. Cherie says the only reason they have Chriselle Strauss, I don't even know who that is, on this season is because she's going through a high-profile divorce. They need the ratings. They will do anything for ratings. I guess that's, sometimes I'm just not sure the public realizes the lengths to which people will go to get attention. I mean, I know they kind of may realize it with the Kardashians and everything else, but there's a lot of regular people who will do the same thing. And we shouldn't just think that because the Kardashians act weird or look weird and all those things that's the type of person that does it. Lots of types of people do it, including the producers of a dancing show that, I don't know. It is, Cherie says, gross. It is certainly gross. It's gross. So gross. All about the mighty dollars. It certainly is. It certainly is. A lot of desperation out there, a lot of competition, and it's all going to the lowest common denominator. No sense of, because, I understand that Dancing with the Stars is a fairly popular program. Do they have to? I mean, I'm guessing that there were a lot of people who are well known for one reason or the other would love to be on the program. People, wholesome people. No, they go after Carol Baskin. All right. The other thing that I wanted to mention before we get to a couple other things. I'm going to go 2 hours tonight. The Zodiac Killer. I'm not a serial killer expert, but you should know that one of my favorite movies of the 21st century anyway is the movie Zodiac with Jake Gyllenhaal and Robert Downey Jr. I just think that it's a fantastic movie. The only part that kind of gets me is when they're at that park and the girl gets stabbed, the guy and the girl are there and she gets stabbed. The guy shows up with the mask and everything and stabs. That part I have to always kind of skip by because it's just too much for me. It's just too much. But I usually do love David Fincher's work. Big fan of him as a director, and I thought that movie is really, really good. But so if you haven't seen that movie, I would suggest it. But I read an article just within the last couple of days. Will the Zodiac Killer ever be caught? I really don't know. As much as many times as I've watched the movie, and I understand it is not a documentary, there are some liberties taken here and there. But I do understand that Jake Gyllenhaal's character in his book was the basis for the movie, so it skews things in his belief of who actually did it. But there are other suspects out there. And what's interesting to me is that, they had the DNA that was on those letters that was sent to the San Francisco Chronicle and other places. The DNA did not match up to the main suspect. Once again, the one that is they feature in the movie. And that is interesting to me, that the DNA didn't match him. Then whose DNA is it? And you would think with all this ancestry and 23andMe and everything else, that they would have matched that DNA at least just lightly, tangentially to somebody else. And I guess that hasn't been done yet. I mean, is the DNA, has it degraded because of the glue that in the stamps or something? Do they still have the DNA of this from those letters, the stamps? Probably. But have they tested it? I'm guessing they have, if they could test it. And seemingly, as of yet, they haven't been able, it hasn't been matched to anybody. Whereas, for example, with the original Night Stalker, that's exactly how he got caught. So, if I'm here on, I would not say these things, as we know, these things can happen every day. Who would have thought the original Night Stalker was ever going to be caught? Really? Who would have thunk it? And then all of a sudden he was and suddenly everybody knew his name. 1 week we were thinking it'd never be solved. And then a week later, we know his name. We know where he lived. We know what he looked like back in the late 70s and the early 80s. We know his kids' names. We know his wife's name. We know everything. And that's how quickly it can happen. So it could happen as quickly for the Zodiac Killer. I just don't think that we can count everything out. I'm just a little surprised that the DNA angle has not revealed anything yet. Brandy says, I just watched Zodiac a couple nights ago. Yeah, it's on Netflix. It's fantastic. It's really good. Touching says, I love that movie. Hey, Nina. Hi from Missouri. How are you? India, I saw that movie in the theater. Even though I knew the story, I was still creeped out. Great film. It is a great film. Well done. So well done. Maybe it's just me about like 70s nostalgia. I like movies, and my favorite decade of movies is the 70s. With The Godfathers, Patton, The French Connection, of course, Star Wars, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Network, Rocky. I could go on and on and on. I think the 70s were the best decade for movies. So any movie then that kind of captures kind of that 70s feel and everything, it's always going to get my attention. Also, who doesn't love Robert Downey Jr.? But of course. And we have to remember that at the time Robert Downey Jr. did that movie, I mean, he was down and out. I mean, he, nobody wanted to finance, insure him to be in any movies because of all his big problems before. And who knew that 2 years after he did that movie, he'd be Iron Man and, be worth like $300 million now. But you look at that he and, what's his name? Can't think of his name right now. The guy that played Hulk. There they were, Iron Man and Hulk in the same movie, and a couple years later than the Marvel movies. So funny how that works. But yeah, at that time, people now look back at it now as, oh, wow, Robert Downey Jr. is in that movie. Well, first of all, he's not even the main character. And I'm going to guess he didn't get paid very much to be in that movie either. Once again, because he was considered a risk because of his drug activity from the past and his addictions. So it's fascinating. The movie's fascinating for that reason as well. I'll take one more question. Penny asked me, somebody should write a book on what to do when someone goes missing. Penny asks me. We were just talking about All the President's Men. India, love that movie too. Love it. Penny, it's probably a good idea, but as I've stated before regarding, somebody needs to write a book about what people should do. People will not read that book because they never think that it's going to happen to them. And once it happens to them, then it's too late. I think it's a great idea, conceptually, theoretically, but we have trouble getting people to go get mammograms and colonoscopies, even though we know that it's much more likely that they're going to get cancer than that ever have a disappearance happen in their family. They won't go do those things. So, as you know, I'm a big person regarding human nature, and it's just not in our nature to prepare for things that we don't think are going to happen to us. That's just the way we are. Because we think there are many other things that are going to happen to us. So we're going to concentrate on those things, not the things that aren't going to happen to us. And even those things that possibly could happen to us, we don't take those safeguards either. Hence the reason that, 25, 30 years, 35 years after it's been proven that, women need to get mammograms starting here and everything, women still get breast cancer out of nowhere. So, and people deny that they're having health issues and let it get worse and worse and worse to the point that they can't recover from it. It's just in our nature. I don't know why that is, but it is. So I think in general, theoretically it's a good idea. I just don't think that's a book that would ever be read. Of course, after the fact, when a disappearance does happen, then they're like, well, what do I got to do? What do I got to do? What do I got to do? But I don't blame people for thinking that disappearances can't happen to them, because the odds of it happening are low. But the problem is, when it does happen, it's bad. And immediately, as soon as it happens, you're already behind. From the second that you find out that your daughter, son, somebody else that you love went missing, you're already behind. And you're playing catch up. So that's why I more concentrate, Penny, on talking about what people should do once it happens. Because if I start talking about, well, here's the list you should write down if a disappearance ever happens in your family, guaranteed most people are going to write it down, but then they'll lose the list because, once again, they don't think it's going to happen to them. Let's talk about this Friday's disappearance, being that we're on to 2 hours almost. The disappearance of Robert Isaac Hurt. We will be referring to him as Robbie during the episode. Interviewed his mother, Becky, on Friday evening once I got up to Brooksville, Pennsylvania. He disappeared. He disappeared. He lived in the Ringgold, Virginia area, but that's not where he disappeared from. He disappeared. His truck was found on Goodyear Boulevard near Danville, Virginia, just at that border between Virginia and North Carolina. And he disappeared on December 9th, 2018. So this is a disappearance that's not even 2 years old. The episode is being called Altered States. Speaking of movies, although I think that came out in like 1980. Who was that guy in it? But the reason it's called Altered States is because Robert was an addict. And what his wife said is, shortly before he disappeared, when he would get high, he would become a different person. He wouldn't know who he was. He would think that instead of when he was in his own house, when he would get high, he would actually think that he was in somebody else's house and that he was the guest there. Totally did not register that he was Robbie Hurt. He was somebody else. And so that's the reason I'm calling this episode Altered States, because it very well could be, although we know that people who suffer from these, what we call fugues of amnesia, they are very, very rare. This is the first disappearance that we've covered where somebody's told me, yeah, when this person would get high, he would think that he was somebody else. And so the general facts of this is that Robbie was married, had 2 children with his wife. He had a child from a prior relationship, but that child did not live with them. And his wife thought that he had kicked the habit, and she caught him using again, so she had to kick him out. So he left their house, and the story goes that he went to a guy he knows. His name was Bob, who lived over the border in North Carolina. The story Bob tells is that Robbie showed up there, got high, overdosed, and Bob brought him back to life with Narcan that he just happened to have there. Once Robbie regained his senses again, he stormed out of Bob's place, jumped in his truck, and took off. A snowstorm was about to happen at the time, so nobody really knew. Bob didn't know where he went. There weren't any searches because of the snow, but once the snowstorm was over in a couple days, Bob discovered Robbie's truck a mile down the road, and that's where the disappearance started. And so I'm open to the idea, if Robbie was high and he was thinking he was somebody else, could it be that he really did walk off and it's only been not even 2 years? Could he be out there, maybe homeless or something, thinking that he is someone else? Once again, because this is what his wife said had occurred shortly before he went missing. Now, as you would imagine, there are some facts to believe that could make us believe that maybe Bob, this buddy, isn't telling the entire truth. And of course, that information will be presented to you during my interview with Robbie's mother, Becky. And she did a great interview. Not one of Unfound's longer episodes. I think this episode's only like an hour and 40 minutes long or something like that. But we get into the details of it. Becky did a great job. She gets right to the point regarding everything regarding her son's disappearance. And so it was a pleasure talking to her. Michelle says, yes, because no one knows what to do regarding writing a book about what people should do regarding disappearances. And you were in panic mode. We had no idea there were search party companies and you could call them in. Michelle, in the beginning, I meant with Brandy's case. We get it, Michelle. We called as soon as we knew. Suzanne says, wondering if Robbie has split personalities. That was not mentioned in talking to his mother. All that was clear is that when he would get high, at least in those, like the week before he disappeared, this had started to happen. So could he have been high, blew out of Bob's? Instead of him believing himself to be Robbie Hurt, did he think his name was John Smith? Gets a mile down the road. Who knows what's going on in his head? Drives the truck into a ditch where it was found and runs off. So that is the disappearance that we are covering this Friday. Once again, the disappearance of Robbie Hurt. His truck was found on Goodyear Boulevard, very close to the Virginia / North Carolina border. Disappeared on December 9th, 2018. The episode's title is Altered States. So that brings us to the end tonight. Talked about tournament this past weekend. 1 round tournament coming up Saturday. Talked about Eric Franks and his car being discovered. Talked about Cleashindra Hall, and in my opinion, the number one suspect in her disappearance was murdered in July. Talked about the polls for both Suzanne Lau and Alexis Badger. Talked about the Jody Husenschrud podcast, Fort Hood YouTube videos, Letecia Stauch. Talked about Dancing with the Stars and Carol Baskin. The Zodiac Killer took a bunch of questions. And then talked about the disappearance of Robbie Hurt, which will be Friday's episode. And that will come up the usual time of 2 p.m. Eastern. Nothing early this week. So once again, if you'd like to become a Patreon member, take part in the think tank and everything else, please go to patreon.com/Unfound Podcast. And I also want to thank Carol for contributing through PayPal within the past week as well. Thank you, Carol, if you are out there. that's all I got. Had a really great time with all of you tonight. Thank you for all the questions, comments, everything. Thank you for watching. And look for some more videos tomorrow and then the episode on Friday. Good night, everyone.